Hello ladies, today we are going to talk about infinitives and indirect statement. So you have been dealing with infinitives since Latin 1, right? They always translate to do something. They're the second principal part. Eventually you learn the passive infinitives, and today you are going to learn that there are actually a total of 6 infinitives, different tenses and voices. You are going to learn how to translate them in a traditional sense for an infinitive, and then you're also going to learn a use of the infinitive, very common use of the infinitive, called indirect statement. Okay, so let's talk about infinitives. There are a total of 6 infinitives in Latin. There are 3 tenses: the present, perfect, and future, and the active and the passive. Now, you have already learned how to form the present active and the present passive infinitive. Today we'll review those and we'll learn the 4 other infinitives. Now, as a review, the present active infinitive, which translates as to blank, is the second principal part. The present passive infinitive, which translates to be blanked, forms one way for the first, second, and fourth conjugations, and a slightly different way for the third, and third IO for that matter. So, first, second, and fourth conjugations, all you need to do is remove the final E and replace it with a long I from the present active infinitive, and you have your present passive. For the third, you need to replace the entire ERE from the second principal part and replace it with an I. Okay? To form the perfect active infinitive, you take the perfect active stem and you add isse, and that translates to have blanked. The perfect passive infinitive is the fourth principal part. That's the first word. The second word is esse, and it means to have been blanked. Future active infinitive is the future active participle, which you guys just learned, plus the infinitive esse. So the first word is the future active participle, the second word is esse, and that translates as to about to blank. And the fourth, the future passive infinitive is super rare. You're actually not going to see it very, very often. And it forms in a very distinct way. It is the fourth principal part with the ending only, plus, that's the first word. And the second word is iri, and it translates as about to be blanked. And like I said, it's actually super rare. Okay, so let's look at an example from each conjugation. First conjugation, our present active infinitive is the second principal part, laudare, to praise. To get the present passive participle for the first conjugation, you replace the final E with a long I, and it translates to be praised. The perfect active infinitive is the perfect active stem plus isse, so to have praise, lauda wisse. Perfect passive infinitive is the fourth principal part, usually with an accusative ending on it, and I'll explain why in a little bit, plus the infinitive esse, to have been praised. The future active infinitive is the future active participle, again, usually with an infinitive ending, which I'll explain in a couple slides, to about to praise. And then the future passive infinitive, laudatum iri, to about to be praised. Okay, so second conjugation, videre, to see. Again, you replace that final E with a long I, videri, to be seen. Vidisse, to have seen. Visum, esse, to have been seen. Visorum, esse, about to be seen, to about to see. And then visum iri, to about to be seen. Third conjugation and third IO. This is where you have a slightly different way of forming the present passive infinitive. Second principal part active, agra, to drive, but then you replace the entire ERE with the long I, so it's agi, to be driven. Egisse, to have driven. Actum, actam, actum esse, to have been driven. Actorum, actoram, actorum esse, to about to drive. And actum iri, to about to be driven. I fear you might not be able to see the very bottom of this. Oh goodness, I'll have to move the screen down. So capio, also a third conjugation. So capere, to take. Capi, to be taken. Capisse, to have taken. Captum, captam, captum esse, to have taken. And then, let's move those down. Capturum, capturam, capturum esse, to about to take. And capti iri, to about to be taken. Okay. Whoops. Our fourth conjugation is going to form its present passive infinitive in the same way as the first and second. So audire, to hear. Audiri, to be heard. Audivisse, to have heard. Auditum, auditam, auditum esse, to have been heard. Auditorum, auditoram, auditorum esse, to about to hear. And auditum iri, to about to be heard. Okay, so how have we used infinitives in the past? The most common use of the infinitive that we have traditionally used is for the complementary infinitive, which is when the infinitive completes the meaning of certain verbs, such as debeo, I ought, possum, I am able, wolo, I want. However, the most common use of the infinitive is indirect statement, and that's what we're going to learn today. An indirect statement is a type of subordinate clause, okay? Subordinate clauses are clauses that cannot exist on their own. They're not independent sentences. They have to be attached to a main clause in order to be a full sentence, not just a fragment. In English, the indirect statement is set up with the conjunction that, okay, and it tells you when something is indirectly being reported. So, for example, the students said that they love Latin. The indirect statement is in contrast to a direct statement, which is in English shown by quotation marks. So, the fact is here is that what the student said is being indirectly reported, right? Set up by this that. If it was a direct quote, right, direct statement, it would be the student said, comma, quotation marks, we love Latin. But we're indirectly reporting what they said. So the student said that they love Latin. Okay, so how do we form indirect statement in Latin? Well, there is no conjunction, that is equivalent to our that. Okay, so that is not how indirect statement is set up. Latin forms the indirect statement by using an infinitive verb with an accusative subject. Okay, so when you see an infinitive with an accusative subject, that is an indirect statement. One of the clues that you are going to be an indirect statement is that the verb in the main clause is going to be what we call a head verb, meaning it is a verb of talking, thinking, feeling, sensing, hearing, seeing, knowing, anything you can do with your head. That's going to set up indirect statement. So we set up indirect statement in English by using the conjunction that. Latin doesn't. So when you translate the indirect statement, you need to supply the conjunction that and then translate the accusative subject and the infinitive as an indicative. So our example, the students said that they love Latin. The discipuli dixerunt, that's our main clause, okay? said, head verb. That, we're inserting the that. They say, accusative subject. Our infinitive verb, that they love Latin. This is going to require some getting used to, right? Because you're used to seeing this infinitive and just translating it to love. But now I'm telling you that there's a way of translating the infinitive as an indicative, and that is when the infinitive is being used in indirect statement. One other thing you should know. The tense of the infinitive tells us when the infinitive is happening in relation to the main verb. That's actually exactly how participles work too, so this is no different. So, present infinitives tell you that the action happened at the same time as the main verb. Perfect infinitives tell you that the action happened before the action of the main verb. And future infinitives, logically, tell you that the action happened after the main verb. So, write down each of these sentences, all 9 of them, and try to give me a translation. We'll go over this tomorrow in class. For each of these sentences, making sure that you are translating the infinitive and indirect statement relative to the main verb. They say that he helps the citizens. Now, try it for the rest of the other sentences. Just a little note about direct statement in Latin. As you guys well know, the Romans did not use punctuation, right? That's why the verb is always at the end of the sentence to show that the sentence is over. So they didn't have quotation marks. The way they showed that they were in direct statement is that they used the verbs inquit or inquam or inquis or ait, ion. And then they usually placed it after the first couple words of the direct quote, okay? Now, most of the editions of Latin that you're going to be reading will have editors who have added quotation marks to make things easier for you. But just so you know, if you wanted to say, the students said, we love Latin, you would put what you want in quotation marks down, and then you would separate it by either inquit or iunt or ait or something like that. So the students said, and then you go to the direct quote. We love Latin. Just because it's written broken up in Latin doesn't mean you have to translate it that way. It would be weird to say, we love, the students said, Latin. Just go ahead and translate this discipuli iunt at the beginning of the sentence and then give your direct quote. All right, ladies. If you have any questions, come to class tomorrow ready to ask them. Translate those, and we'll go over them in class. Stupid announcements. And we will go over them in class. All right, have a good night.